Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for new stories from YellowCat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Medical professionals of Reddit. What's the funniest thing a patient has said under anesthesia?
I'm preparing to salsa dance. Stand back, everybody. There's nothing you can do to stop me.
My dad, Italian, was waking up from anesthesia and kept looking at his Asian nurse and saying he was so glad his daughter was with him, and that he loved his daughter. The nurses were confused, so they went out into the waiting to check for his daughter. I was the only one in the waiting area, and when they saw me and started hysterically laughing. I am Korean by birth, but was adopted by my loving Italian family. I was the patient after coming out of surgery for a hernia at the age of about 15 to 16. My father helped me to the bathroom in the hospital. I was pretty effed up still and said,
Boy, Dad, I was just so worried I was gonna get an erection during the procedure.
He laughed and made a slicing motion with his hand, implying the doctor would have cut my D off, and I burst into tears and threw up on myself. LOL, I bet he promptly regretted that joke. Not anesthesia, but delirium. Introduced the oncoming nurse to the patient. The patient gestured grandly around the room and said, "Nurse's name, meet all my friends," to an empty room. I just had a bowel resection and was hopped up on morphine. My divorced parents hadn't sat in a room that long together in forever. My sister, uncomfortably quiet between them, tells me my junk is hanging out of my hospital gown, and I say,
If my balls are hanging out, that makes this a ball gown.
Really helped with the tension. The most memorable funny one was a guy who sat bolt upright, mime rolling a cigarette, and tuck it behind his ear. Saving it for Ron, when I asked what he was doing. Anesthesia can be a wild trip. I had double jaw surgery to correct my underbite. I took sign language in college. They typically don't wire your jaw shut anymore, they just use strong rubber bands, but you can still talk. I knew I'd be able to talk. Yet, when I woke up from the surgery, apparently I kept trying to sign. The nurses were like, we don't know sign language, honey. Based on how little I remember from college, I'm certain it wasn't even good sign language. Enthusiastically signs. What did he say? Fence, fence, fence up the down elephant soup corn. Was recovering a patient after surgery who got ketamine, which has a known side effect of making you super emotional. When she woke up, she started catcalling me, telling me how attractive I was. Then she got worked up because she was thirsty, so I told her I could get her ice chips. As I am getting her ice chips, she starts to go, I hate to see you leave, but I love to see you go. As I disappeared to get her some ice chips, she starts crying real tears that she scared me off and how sorry she was. Way to go, heartbreaker. Yelling for his brother, then whispering loudly to him, check to see if I still have my D. I think they took my D. Then proceeded to flash the whole room. The procedure was to remove a benign tumor in his cheek. Face cheek, not butt cheek. Better safe than sorry. I'm a consultant anesthetist, UK, and there are loads. Often declarations of love from the patient as the drugs are kicking in. My all-time favorite is a 40-something guy a few years ago. He needed a testicle removed for cancer. He'd never had anesthetic before and was super nervous to the point of barely saying anything to anyone. As the drugs started to kick in, we realized someone was quietly singing. It was the patient.
Hitler has only got one ball.
Göring has two but very small. Himmler is rather similar, but poor old Goebbels has no balls at all. Had a patient come into recovery after surgery. She farted so long and loud, the entire 20-bed unit heard her. Then she said, I was trying to clear my throat, excuse me, and I want a vanilla latte, I got a headache. As medical professionals, we had to hold in the laughter, but that didn't stop patients from turning into hyenas. Not a medical professional, but my mom was coming out from under anesthesia after a procedure a few years ago, and I was trying to help her. She puckered her lips, so I picked up her water cup and asked if she wanted some. She turned her face towards me and said,
"Do I look like an airplane?"
The nurses and I completely lost it. I still tease her about it sometimes. Not a doctor, but I was told by my dentist that when he was prepping me to remove my wisdom teeth, I asked him why he became a dentist. I vaguely remember him telling me a story about how when he was a preteen, he was at a local pool running around when he slipped and smashed his chin on concrete and shattered some of his teeth. Ouch! He was amazed at how well they reconstructed his teeth that he decided to go into dentistry. Apparently, I then looked this man in the eye and said,
"Well, that's a stupid effing reason to become a dentist."
"Sorry, Dr. J." 18-year-old girl recognized the male anesthesiologist from Tinder last week and accused him multiple times of not showing up to their agreed date while randomly falling half asleep in between. As we put her back in bed, she mumbled that she is not even mad, just generally disappointed in men, and that she still thinks he's pretty. Not medic, but patient. I had appendix surgery after preventive 2-day fasting, water was okay, and anesthesia hit me pretty hard. When I was told I had to use one of those plastic urinals or whatever because they said the abdominal effort could make me faint, I just said,
"I am not going to poop on a plastic tupper. If I pass out in the toilet like a hero, then let it be."
Obligatory, not a doctor, but I was the patient. I had to get my wisdom teeth removed at the hospital because they were, for a lack of a better term, effed. When I woke up, the nurse was going through the routine to make sure I was not brain dead. She asked my name by saying, "Who are you?" I responded with, "I'm a lesbian." My parents were in the room. They didn't know at the time. That was how I came out. D, you really came out of anesthesia swinging. Swinging the other way. In the early days of my surgical training, there was a day that I was assigned to a colonoscopy list. Standard practice is to pre-medicate patients in the anesthetic bay if required, particularly if they are a bit anxious about the procedure. I was clerking one of the patients in the anesthetic bay, going through consent and the usual pre-op routine, when I noticed that she was giving me these weird sidelong glances and that her eyes would dart away every time I tried to make eye contact with her. She was also extremely fidgety and was stammering a lot in her responses to my questions. I kind of shrugged it off as preoperative nervousness and let the anesthetist do his business. Fast forward 10 minutes and I'm standing behind her. She curled up in the fetal position with her A hanging out and I colonoscope in hand. As the propful starts rushing through her veins, she turns right around, grips my forearm, and stares up at me with a dreamy look on her face and goes,
"You know what, Doc? I bet you kill it with the ladies."
A moment later, she was asleep and I was checking her colon for polypsis. Dislocated my shoulder in a way that my arm ended up stuck up over my head. Apparently, while all hopped up on Demerol, I was laughing hysterically while the doctor was standing on the table/gurney wrestling with my arm to get it back into the socket. I don't remember a thing. The very first time I was under, I was in 3rd grade and was relatively scared. What kept me brave was the promise of Burger King breakfast afterwards. It was an early morning procedure that required fasting, and I rarely got fast food. They ended up running behind that day, so it was up in the air if I would wake up to get out in time to get my breakfast, which ended at 10. The first words out of my mouth were, "What time is it?" when my mom informed me that it was already about 9:30. I tried to get out of bed and nearly ripped out my IV in the process. When she tried to tell me that we would be late and I could get it another day, I promptly burst into tears. I did get my Burger King a different day. A girl I worked with told the story of how she got grounded from age 15 to 18 because of anesthesia. She was having a colonoscopy, and as she was a minor, her mother was in the room with her. After she was sedated, and as the technician started to insert the scope, she mumbled,
"No, not again," boyfriend's name. "It hurt last time."
Her mother was not amused. That I look like a guy who worked for Bon Jovi. I was the patient, but right before Christmas a couple of years ago, I had my gallbladder removed. In the recovery room, as I was waking up, I became obsessed with singing the 12 Days of Christmas song. I kept asking the nurses what order the verses were in. As they were wheeling me out of the room, I heard a nurse belt out, "5 golden rings," which was followed by everyone's laughter. I gave a kid methoxyflurane after he broke his arm. When we got to the hospital, he went into the pediatric section of the ED, and there were stickers on the wall of Sesame Street characters. He started talking about this unicorn on the wall, there wasn't one, and how it was trying to be friends with Elmo, but Elmo didn't want to be friends with him. His mom and I had a chuckle, and I had to pry the whistle out of his hands. Wife got an epidural right before childbirth and said some funny things. Once the baby's head was in the birth canal, the nurses asked if she wanted to touch her baby, and she said that nobody is allowed to have S with her daughter. LMAO, this reminds me of when I gave birth. The midwife said, "If you reach down now, we'll be able to feel the baby." I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Funnily enough, I can feel her." My husband burst out laughing. Apparently the midwife's face was a picture, but I was too busy pushing out a human to notice. He still giggles about it, and our daughter's 5 now. Woman woke up from surgery and said to her husband,
"David, that alarm clock has a nose and it's running. Wipe it."
Anesthesiologist here. During recovery from general anesthesia, I called one of my patients by his full name in a loud voice. He opened his eyes, suddenly jumped upright and sit on the bed, and he said something.
"Sir, yes, sir."
He was under military service at that time. "General anesthesia salutes!" I apparently can't handle my anesthesia. The first time I woke up, I asked the nurse if I was going to be able to fight by Monday. My wife properly translated that to, "Can he teach his wrestling class?" Before we went home, she wanted to drop off my prescriptions at CVS. She left me locked in the running car. After she dropped off the prescription, she turned around to find me in the CVS standing in the frozen dairy section holding German chocolate ice cream. I told her I needed it because my people made it. Car was still running with the passenger door left open. Oh god, I woke up sobbing. I was convinced that I was married to Cedric Diggory and he had just been killed by Voldemort. I'm cringing so hard just thinking about it. I was inconsolable. 65-year-old woman who had a wrist surgery. She was anxious, so they gave her a good whack of propofol, the milk of amnesia. Mid-surgery, she was having the time of her life. In a thick Northern Irish accent, she was like,
"Did you just fill me up to me head with vodka? Give me a wee bit more, boy. I'm loving this house."
Then she said the anesthetist looked like Freddie Mercury and started singing "Don't Stop Me Now." The anesthetist looked nothing like Freddie. After being put under to have my wisdom tooth extracted, I told everyone for an hour that my balls were tingling. I mean, they were, and folks just needed to know because it was hilarious. At least, to me, it was so funny. We had to stop by the grocery store on the way home, and I think a few dozen people there heard about it. My poor wife. Thank you for watching. Guys, thank you for all of the support and likes. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.